Here we're going to be going over chapter 4 in the book, talking about ethics and corporate social responsibility. You can see some of the learning objectives. In other words, thinking about what obeying the law is, asking about the questions you need to answer, distinguishing between compliance and integrity-based ethics codes, defining CSR, and comparing companies' responsibilities, and then analyzing what is the role of U.S. businesses globally. So these are some of the key things we'll be going over as far as this chapter is concerned. Now, one of the things to think about is ethics is more than just following law. Okay, there have been a lot of scandals that have really hit various industries and companies because of it. And the things we have to do is make sure that those who do break the law get punished and make sure that we are really clear as far as what our numbers, what our accounting records are really all about. I think most people remember the Volkswagen issue. Volkswagen was cheating as far as how much pollution their diesel vehicles actually put out. And it was one of those things where when they weren't running and they were putting them up to a particular machine, it was registering one thing, very clean. However, when you actually went out and did it, it was actually totally something different. And it wound up costing them more to pay the fines than it would have to actually fix the engines. It's more than just following the law. It's standards of behavior. In other words, it's behavior that's accepted by society as right versus wrong. And the thing is, most Americans don't have any moral absolutes. A lot of times I'll sit there and say, well, so-and-so is doing it. Why not? Everybody does it, sort of thing. When you think about some of the moral values, the things that are right, all right, integrity, in other words, doing what you say you're going to do, practicing self-control, telling the truth, honesty, having the courage to step up when something's wrong. Wrong things, things like cheating, okay, being cruel to somebody else. Nobody likes those kinds of things. And ethics actually starts with each of us, all right? Now, the thing I keep going back to in asking students this one question, would I be proud to tell my children of what it was that I did when I was in school? When I look at the papers that I do, would I be proud to show my children this is an example of the things that I've done and expect them to do the same thing? So when you're thinking about some of the ethical decisions that you run into, is what I'm doing legal? Is it balanced? And how will it make me feel about myself? Because one of the things that students typically get into is the idea of plagiarism. Plagiarism is copying something from somebody else and showing it as your own. One of the primary things that you can do when you're writing papers and things like that is to reference where you get information. If you get something from somebody else, from a book, from a magazine, wherever it is, if you get something from somebody else, you reference that within the paper. And the reason is because what you're doing is you're saying, I got this from this person. You are giving them credit for what it is that they did. You're not taking credit for something that you did not do. And that will actually have an impact on your grade. If you are caught plagiarizing, you could be failed as far as that class is concerned. You could be kicked out of school. I have caught students who were cheating on some things. They failed. And they could be kicked out of school. I know some athletes who lost their scholarships because they were cheating. So you don't want to cheat and try to plagiarize something. In other words, calling something that is actually from someone else and calling it your own. Now, when you start talking about businesses, ethics has to start at the top. Managers have to say, this is what is going to be the right thing to do for our organization. As it says here, no matter what others do, it's still up to us and what it is that we will do as far as acting ethically is concerned. The things that influence managerial ethics, first of all, individual things, such as our values, our background, our personalities. From an organizational standpoint, you're going to have top management philosophy. What is top management actually expecting from folks? What is the reward system that's set up? Is the reward system set up where people will try to cheat? Or is it set up where you make sure that everybody participates fairly? And you think about the environment, okay? Things like competition. what kind of economic conditions. These things can impact how people act as far as their ethics are concerned. When you start thinking about ethical standards, there's compliance and integrity-based ethics codes. Compliance-based is basically following the law. Integrity-based is saying, okay, we're going to follow the law. We're also going to do something beyond that. Following the law or compliance-based ethics is just primarily avoiding criminal misconduct. And you have the lawyers who are actually leading the charge on all this. With integrity-based ethics, what you're doing is you're following the law and internal standards. What do we see as the right thing to do? And you have managers who are the leaders of this, making sure that they are walking the talk and they're making sure that everybody is following through on the ethics that's expected of everyone in the organization. If we're going to improve business ethics here in the United States, first of all, top management has to adopt and unconditionally support the code of conduct. They have to walk the talk. Employees have to understand what it is that it's expected of them and how to do it. And then everybody has to be trained as far as what is it that we actually mean when we say act ethically. We also need to make sure that we have an ethics office that's set up within the organization. So it allows people to be a whistleblower if they see something that is actually going wrong. Our ethics and the things that we're doing have to include outsiders, the people that we're dealing with. And the reason is because if we are acting unethically, and we could be impacting them, or if they are acting unethically, it could impact us. So we need to make sure that everybody that we're working with is doing everything we can to follow through as far as the ethics and do the things that we say we're going to do. Now, along with ethics goes corporate social responsibility, or CSR. CSR is basically saying, what are we going to do for the community? What are we doing for our stakeholders? Not just stockholders. Now, stockholders are one stakeholder. A stakeholder is someone who has some kind of impact or something to do with the business. Stakeholders would be the stockholders. It could also be the employees, the surrounding community, the businesses that you're dealing with. Everyone that has something to do with that organization is a stakeholder, and we need to make sure that we are considering them in our corporate social responsibility. And when we talk about CSR, there's different approaches to it. You have philanthropy, in other words, giving away money. You have social initiatives, in other words, things like Tom's shoes. For every pair of shoes somebody buys, they give a pair of shoes to some poor kid in Africa, sort of thing. You have the corporate responsibility. In other words, making sure that everything you're doing is safe and you're hiring the right folks. And then also you have your policies. What are you doing as far as your social and political stances? There are a lot of nonprofits that are out there that need people's money. And you can see some of the big ones that are out there. United Way, Salvation Army, YMCA, all of these need big donations because they have big businesses that they're trying to handle. And you can see the amount of the donations that actually go to the services. My heart resides with the Red Cross, the American Red Cross. I was raised by the American Red Cross. My father was career Red Cross. I remember when I was a little kid, he would take me to various disasters that had happened. In other words, there was a fire that burned out a hotel. And I was there. He took me there to help out. There were a series of floods. He took me to do a telethon, raising money for it. When I was 18, when I turned 18, the day afterwards, I gave my first pint of blood. So I have a big place in my heart for charities that are out there that are actually helping other folks. And so one of the things that a lot of CSR initiatives do is help those charities. A lot of positive impacts can come from the things that companies do as far as corporate social responsibility. In other words, encouraging employees to volunteer on company time. In other words, giving back to the community somehow, and we're going to go ahead and pay you so that you can give back to the community. And a lot of students are saying, you know what, I'll take less salary to work for somebody that I feel is a socially responsible company. Now, there's a lot of responsibilities that go along with corporate social responsibility. First of all, you have a responsibility to customers. President John F. Kennedy basically put together what he called his rights of consumers. In other words, as a consumer of a product or a service, I have a right to safety, to be informed, to choose, and to be heard if there's something I don't like. There's also the idea of knowing what it is that the companies that we're buying those products and services from, what are they doing as far as their CSR efforts? A lot of times what's happening now is companies are letting folks know via social media what it is that they're doing regarding corporate social responsibility. Now, one of the problems that I have with what a lot of companies do is they use that as nothing more than public relations. So the question that I always have when I hear about companies on social media talking about their corporate social responsibility initiatives, why are you doing this? Is it strictly for PR, or do you truly have a heart someplace for that? Do you truly are you truly trying to make a difference as far as that nonprofit or that social issue is concerned? There's also responsibility to investors, being clear about what it is that they're doing as far as their finances, and then also not allowing insider trading. That's basically where somebody in the organization knows something that nobody else does, and they share that information with someone outside the organization so that they can purchase or sell stock and make money off of it. Very unethical. There's also the responsibility to employees. In other words, help employees create jobs that allow for development and upward mobility, treating people with respect, and offering salaries and benefits that the company can afford and that the employees would want. There's also responsibility for reducing fraud. People who are disgruntled, as far as workers are concerned, will have a tendency to do things that may be unethical. In other words, not accepting responsibility, making commitments that they ignore, hoarding resources and information, just doing the minimum. These are things that are unethical, that if the organization is not treating people right, you get this kind of behavior. There's a lot of companies that have a tendency to be very much admired. So for example, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, General Electric, things like this. At one time, all of them were some of the most admired companies. One of the problems that we're seeing recently, though, is there are problems within these companies. So for example, Apple and outsourcing a majority of their manufacturing and everything to China and some of the issues that have been going on there. Amazon has been in the news recently as far as how they treat people and the amount of work that they're asking them to do, things like this. Disney is taking it in the shorts right now with the coronavirus thing that's going on as far as letting a lot of people go. So there's a lot of companies that are out there that have been admired in the past. Sometimes that admiration goes down based on some of the things that are going on. There's also the responsibility to the environment. In other words, what is it that we're doing as far as taking care of the environment and the things that are around us? The green movement has become big, that whole idea of climate change and things, and thinking about reducing the carbon footprint that the organization may have. The other thing is, what are we doing as far as recycling? What are we doing as far as taking care of the resources that we might use? And then there's the international ethics and social responsibility. What is it that we're doing that's impacting companies overseas? For example, IKEA, 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 the furniture manufacturer, at one time was really slammed for doing business with companies in India that were actually using child labor. They had put together a process where they squelched that, where they really wanted to make sure that the companies they were doing business with did not use child labor. At this point in time, one of the things that they're doing is actually setting up schools in India, in the various states in India, to keep the kids out of the fields and out of the manufacturing areas, and putting them to work in schools, or putting them in schools. So it's really kind of interesting to see what it is that IKEA has done as far as the international ethics and social responsibility. These are some of the key points from the chapter. If you have questions, give me a shout.